Dahlia Vance yanked open the black car door, tossed her tote bag onto the leather seat, and slid in with a sigh. Finally, midtown traffic is a nightmare. Can we please just go? I'm already late. The man in the driver's seat blinked at her, one hand still on the steering wheel. Sure, he said, confused but calm. Wait, you're not wearing the uniform, she muttered, glancing sideways. Did they change it? Ugh, whatever. Just head to the Rosedale Center. The gala starts in 30 minutes. He nodded once, lips twitching slightly, and pulled the car into motion. Dahlia didn't even look at him. She was too busy pulling her long curls into a low bun and rummaging through her bag for lipstick. Her nerves were already frayed. This was the biggest night of her life. The Rosedale Arts Gala was her one shot at getting her work in front of the right people. Her paintings had been accepted last minute when another artist dropped out, and she didn't even have time to be grateful. She just needed to get there, smile, and hope someone rich enough to buy a Manhattan penthouse fell in love with her work. She capped the lipstick and glanced over. You're quiet, not big on small talk. The man's voice was deep and smooth. I try not to talk too much while driving. Fair, I'm Dahlia, by the way, she added because it felt weird not to say anything. And thanks for getting me there, seriously. He cut her a glance, his eyes amused. I'm Adrian. Nice to meet you, Adrian, she said, distracted by her phone's frantic buzzing. She silenced it without checking, probably her sister asking if she remembered to bring business cards. She hadn't. When they pulled up to the Rosedale Center's marble steps, lit by golden street lamps and the glow of camera flashes, Dahlia was already halfway out the door. Okay, thank you again. I owe you one. Maybe I'll paint you something if I ever make it big. Adrian stepped out too. She turned quickly. You don't need to get my door. I'm not your driver, he said finally, casually. Her entire body froze. What? She breathed. I was parked out front waiting for someone when you jumped in. I figured you were in a rush, so I just went with it. Dahlia stared. You're kidding, he shook his head. Nope. Oh my God, she whispered, horror crawling up her throat. I just hijacked some stranger's car. I didn't lock the doors, he said, shrugging. So technically, you invited yourself. She made a sound like a dying cat. I'm so sorry. I thought you were from the car service I booked. Same make, same color. Oh no, don't worry about it, he said, smiling now. You got where you needed to go. Dahlia blinked hard. You're really not mad. If I was, I wouldn't have driven you here. He tucked his hands into his coat pockets. Good luck tonight, Dahlia. Wait, she said quickly, heart still hammering. Let me make it up to you somehow. I basically kidnapped you. I'm fine. Really? At least take a look at my art, she offered, a little desperate now. It's inside. Might be worth the trip, he paused. All right, deal. They walked up the steps together. Dahlia's nerves were now tangled with embarrassment, but Adrian didn't seem fazed. He moved with the calm confidence of someone who didn't get shaken easily. She led him to the third floor, where her pieces were displayed against a gray velvet wall. Her paintings, vivid, emotional portraits of city life, stood out in the sea of abstract and minimalist work. A few people wandered by and complimented them, but no one stayed long. Adrian, however, lingered. He looked at one painting in particular, a woman on a rainy street corner, her umbrella flipped by the wind, her expression raw and exposed. This one, he said. It feels honest. Dahlia looked at him, surprised. That's exactly what I was going for. He turned to her. You're talented. Thank you, she said softly, warmth blooming in her chest. I really needed to hear that tonight. Before she could say more, a man in a tuxedo came up behind them. Dahlia. There you are, he gushed. You're causing quite a stir. A few collectors are asking about your work. Do you have a minute? She looked between him and Adrian. Would you excuse me? Adrian nodded. Go, I'll be around. She hesitated, then went. For the next hour, her life became a blur of conversations, business cards, and champagne. But even as she smiled and nodded, her mind kept drifting back to the man who wasn't her driver and the way he looked at her painting like it meant something. When she finally broke away, Adrian was gone. Dahlia stepped outside, the night air sharp against her skin. She scanned the street, but no sign of him, just a line of town cars and a busy sidewalk. She sighed, trying not to feel disappointed. It wasn't like she knew him. It was just something about him had felt different, easy, real. The next morning, she shuffled into her coffee shop job on zero sleep. The gala had gone well. She'd sold 2 paintings, but all she could think about was how she'd never see Adrian again until he walked in. She nearly dropped a tray of muffins. He looked out of place in the tiny cafe wearing a tailored coat, sharp black boots, and a navy cashmere scarf. His dark hair was tousled from the wind, and his eyes locked on hers immediately. "You again," she said, stunned. "I wanted to return the favor," Adrian said. "You gave me a private art tour. Least I could do is buy you a coffee," she blinked. "You don't have to, I want to." They sat in the corner, coffee cups steaming in their hands. Dahlia tried to act normal, but her heart was doing flips. "So, what do you actually do?" she asked finally. Adrian hesitated. "I own a few companies, real estate, tech, that kind of thing." "Oh, you're one of those guys," she teased. "I guess I am." He said it so simply, so casually, she didn't think twice. Not until a week later, when he sent a black car to pick her up for dinner, led her into a private rooftop restaurant, and casually mentioned having a board meeting in Tokyo the next morning. That's when it hit her. She hadn't just mistaken him for a driver. She'd mistaken a billionaire for a driver, and somehow, impossibly, he'd kept showing up. And each time, it felt less like a coincidence and more like something she didn't want to live without. Dahlia leaned back in her chair, eyes wide as a waiter placed a crystal flute of champagne in front of her, its golden contents catching the glow of the rooftop lanterns. The restaurant, if you could even call it, that didn't have a name on the door. Just a sleek pane of tinted glass and a biometric scanner she pretended not to notice. The host had greeted Adrian like an old friend, and now they were seated at a table that overlooked the entire Manhattan skyline, like they were floating above the world. "This is..." She started, then trailed off because Fancy felt like calling Versailles a nice cottage. He lifted a brow, his tone light. "Too much. I was going to say illegal," she said. "I'm not entirely convinced this place isn't a front for international spies." Adrian gave a low laugh, his gaze softening as he studied her. "Would it put you more at ease if I said the chef used to work out of a food truck in Queens?" She narrowed her eyes. "Did he really?" "He did. Before he got bored of Michelin stars." "You're making that up." "I swear on the duck confit." When the server returned with an amuse-bouche that looked like a sculpture made of edible gold and microgreens, Dahlia leaned closer over the table. "Okay, I have to ask, why are you doing this?" "All of this," she said, motioning vaguely toward the sweeping skyline and the garden of white orchids that framed the rooftop like a secret garden. "You mean dinner?" he asked. "I mean the impossible dinner, the private rooftop, the car. The fact that you tracked down the coffee shop where I work like some extremely charming detective." He took a sip of his drink before answering. "Because I liked you the second you threw yourself into my car and barked at me to drive." "Oh God," she groaned, covering her face. "Please stop reminding me. I liked that you didn't hesitate, you were bold, and when we talked you didn't care who I was or what I had. I didn't know what you had, exactly." His voice turned quieter. It felt real. She let that sit for a moment, then folded her arms on the table. "And now that I do know, that's what I'm figuring out." Dahlia hesitated. "You're not the first rich guy to walk into my orbit, you know, I imagine not. But you're the first one who didn't lead with it or wear it like a badge. Does it change things?" "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But I'm not going to pretend it doesn't make me cautious." "Good," he said. "Caution is smart, but I'm not trying to impress you with this," he added, gesturing to the view. "I just wanted to give you a night you won't forget." Her smile was slow. "That's a dangerous promise. Only if I break it." The rest of the evening unfolded like a dream. Courses arrived like magic flavors she couldn't pronounce, textures she didn't know food could have. Adrian never once looked at the menu. He knew everyone's name, they all knew his. But there was no arrogance to it. Just quiet confidence, like he was used to holding the world in his palm but didn't feel the need to squeeze. When they left, he didn't call a car. He took her hand and led her down a private staircase to a waiting sedan. The driver opened the door without a word. She slid in, still processing. As they pulled away, she glanced at him. "Do you always operate like this? Surprise rooftop dinners? Secret chefs? Only on Tuesdays," he said dryly. "It's Thursday." "Then I'm overdue," she laughed, leaning her head against the cool glass. "So what's your actual job, Adrian? Besides mysterious billionaire dinner host?" I'm the founder of a private equity firm, he said. We acquire and restructure companies, mostly global ones. Sounds intense. It can be, but I like rebuilding things. Taking something broken and making it work. She looked over, curious. Were you always aiming for this life? He was quiet for a moment. No, I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx. My parents worked 2 jobs each. I started coding in high school, sold my first app at 20, and built from there. She blinked. You're self-made. I prefer the term stubborn. That's impressive. He glanced at her. Don't look at me like I'm a museum exhibit. I'm not, she said honestly. I just didn't expect any of this. Neither did I. They pulled up in front of her building, a walk-up with cracked steps and a flickering porch light. Adrian stepped out first and opened her door. He didn't flinch at the graffiti or the couple arguing 2 doors down. He just stood there, waiting. I had a really good time, she said, suddenly nervous. So did I, she hovered. Good night, then. He stepped closer. Dahlia. Her name in his mouth was something else entirely. She looked up. I'm not the guy who plays games, he said. If you don't want to see me again, I'll respect that. But if you do, I'm all in. She hesitated, pulse quickening. All in. I don't do casual. Not anymore. She searched his face. Okay, I'll see you again. He smiled slowly, then turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the doorway with her heart racing. Over the next 2 weeks, Adrian wove himself into her life in ways she didn't know she needed. He never showed up without warning, but his presence was intentional. He sent her a sketchbook with her initials embossed in gold. When she mentioned she'd never been to the ballet, tickets arrived box seats with her name on the envelope. One morning, her favorite brand of paint, the kind she could never afford, appeared on her doorstep in a wooden case, but he never made her feel small. He never made her feel bought. He listened, he asked questions, he remembered things she forgot she'd told him, and Dahlia. She began to fall, but with every layer she peeled back, more questions bloomed. He was kind, yes, generous always, but beneath that there was something else, a quiet heaviness. A shadow he didn't talk about. One evening, as they walked along the Hudson, wind whipping at her scarf, she asked quietly, "Is there something you're not telling me?" He stopped walking. "Why do you ask?" "Because you feel like a man who's lost something." His jaw tightened. "There is something. But I'm not sure you're ready to hear it." She faced him fully. "Try me." He looked at her for a long moment, then exhaled. 2 years ago, I was engaged." Her stomach dropped. "Oh, she died. A car crash on the way to meet me for dinner." I still remember the last thing she said. Dahlia's breath caught. "Adrian, I didn't date for a long time after that. I didn't trust myself or the world." She reached for his hand. "Why me then? Because you didn't see the suit or the money, you saw me. And I needed that more than I realized." She squeezed his fingers, her voice soft. "Then let me keep seeing you." He nodded once slowly, as if something inside him was loosening for the first time in years, but neither of them saw the flashbulb go off across the street. Or the headline that would hit the gossip sites by morning. Billionaire Adrian Graves spotted with unknown woman in West Village, and suddenly, the quiet thing they were building wasn't so quiet anymore. The knock on Dahlia's apartment door came too early for a Saturday morning. She blinked at the clock beside her futon. 7:12. She padded barefoot across the creaky floor, pulling her robe tighter. Through the peephole, a familiar silhouette stood tall in a dark coat, hair tousled from the drizzle outside. She opened the door, heart already racing. "Adrian," he held up his phone, screen turned away from her. "Have you seen this yet?" She stepped aside wordlessly to let him in. He paced once across her narrow living room, then turned. "Someone followed us. The photos are everywhere. They named you." Dahlia's stomach dropped. "How did they even know who I was?" "Your art exhibit. Your name was in the gala program. All it takes is one person putting the pieces together." She sat slowly on the edge of the couch, her throat dry. "I didn't think. I thought it would be quiet." "Just us?" "I should have known better," Adrian said. "I've dealt with this before, but I should have protected you from it." She shook her head. "This isn't your fault." "Actually," he said, eyes locking onto hers, "it is. I brought all of this into your life." He dropped into the chair across from her, elbows resting on his knees. "There's going to be more. They'll dig. They always do. I need to know you're ready for that." "I'm not," she said honestly. "But I also don't want to disappear just because someone took a photo." He nodded once, approving. Then we face it. Later that morning, her phone rang off the hook. The gallery director called, asking if she'd scheduled any press interviews, then backpedaled frantically when she explained. Her sister left a voicemail asking if she was dating a prince. And her inbox overflowed with messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years. By afternoon, the story had exploded. Headlines labeled her everything from enigmatic artist to mystery muse. Most were harmless, some were cruel. She sat at her cafe job, trying to pretend nothing had changed, but customers whispered. A woman took a photo while pretending to stir her coffee, and her manager pulled her into the back office with an apologetic look. "We're getting calls," he said. "All day, some reporters. Some customers pretending they're booking catering. I'm sorry, Dahlia, it's not sustainable," she nodded, already knowing what was coming. "I think you should take some time off. Let this blow over." She walked home in the rain, the wind slicing through her jacket, her hands trembling. Adrian was waiting on the stoop. "I should have come sooner." "I lost my job," she said, voice hollow. "I'll talk to them." "No," she said sharply. "Don't fix this. It's not something you can throw money at." He stepped back, hurt flickering across his face. "That's not what I was doing," she exhaled, shaking her head. "I know, I need to feel like I'm still me." "I understand." But he didn't leave. He followed her up the stairs, sat with her on the floor, and listened as she let the frustration spill out. "I worked so hard to build something real," she said, "and now I'm being reduced to a headline." "You're not a headline to me, I know," she whispered. "That's why you're still here." The next day, Adrian called in favors, not to fix things for her, but to protect her. His legal team issued a cease and desist to the more invasive outlets. A private firm removed her address from search engines, and he quietly arranged for a security detail to watch the building from a discreet distance. She didn't ask for any of it, but she didn't push him away either. That weekend, he invited her to his home for the first time. It wasn't what she expected. The penthouse was beautiful, yes, floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors, and a skyline view that made her breath catch. But it also felt lived in. A bookshelf lined with worn novels. A record player with a half-finished jazz record still spinning. A painting, half-finished, tucked behind a velvet armchair. "You paint?" she asked, surprised. "Used to," he said, running a hand through his hair. Before things got loud, she turned to him, realization dawning. "You didn't just like my work, you understood it," he nodded. "It reminded me of something I lost." They sat in silence for a while, the city humming below them. He poured a glass of wine, handed it to her, then sat beside her on the couch. "There's something else I haven't told you," he said quietly. She tensed, but nodded for him to continue. "My father died when I was 23. He never saw what I built, but he left behind a mess, a company on the verge of collapse, lawsuits, debt. I stepped in to fix it. That's how Graves Holdings started. I thought you said you built everything from scratch." "I did, but I did it on the ashes of something else." She looked at him, really looked. "That's why you're always in control, because you had to be." "Yes," she reached out, took his hand. "You don't have to be with me." His grip tightened. "That's the thing, Dahlia. With you I want to be, but differently. Better." Their kiss that night wasn't rushed. It was slow, earned, a culmination of every moment they hadn't said what was building between them. And when he whispered her name like a promise, she believed him. But peace didn't last. On Monday, a new article dropped, this one crueler. It claimed she was leveraging the relationship to advance her career, that she'd orchestrated the gallery slot, that she was a gold digger. She stared at the screen in disbelief. "They're saying I used you," she said, voice shaking. Adrian scanned the article silently, then looked up. "They're trying to discredit you. That means you scared someone." "I don't want to scare anyone. I just want to be left alone." "Then we make them irrelevant," he said. "Come with me this weekend. There's a gala, a real one, high profile. If we go together publicly, they'll see we're not hiding, and they'll have nothing left to speculate." She hesitated. "I don't have anything to wear." "I already took care of that." He led her into another room where a single garment bag hung on a mirrored hook. Inside was a gown midnight blue, sleek and structured, with a neckline that dipped just enough to make her breath catch. "I didn't know your size," he said, "so I had them tailor it to your measurements from the gala program photos." She stared at him, stunned. "You're unbelievable." "I just pay attention." The night of the gala arrived like a storm on the horizon. Adrian's private car picked her up first. When she stepped inside, he was already waiting, dressed in a tuxedo that looked like it had been stitched directly onto him by angels. His eyes swept over her, and for a moment the world stilled. "You look like a secret," he said. "One I want to keep forever." Her breath hitched. At the entrance of the gala, flashbulbs exploded. But this time they didn't duck. They walked in hand, heads high, her name already on the lips of every guest. Inside, the crowd parted for him. People greeted him with reverence. And Dahlia, for the first time, understood the weight of his world, but he never once let go of her hand. "Why are they all watching?" she asked under her breath. "Because they've never seen me bring anyone before," she stiffened. "Ever, not once." The whispers grew louder. But so did her resolve. By the end of the night, a woman approached, elegant, poised, clearly someone of influence. "I've heard so much about you," she said, extending a hand. "Adrian doesn't talk about many people, but he never shuts up about you." Dahlia blinked. "Really? He's different with you. Lighter, I hope you know what that means." She did. She truly did. But later, as they danced beneath the crystal chandeliers, her hand in his, her body pressed to his in a way that felt like home, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. A storm she couldn't yet name, because every fairy tale has a cost, and hers was just about to present the bill. Dahlia stood barefoot at the edge of the terrace, the hem of her silk robe brushing her ankles as the first light of dawn folded across the Manhattan skyline. The gala had ended only hours ago, but sleep hadn't come. Not with Adrian's heartbeat still echoing in her ears, and the weight of the night coiled tightly in her chest. Inside the penthouse, the clink of a glass broke the silence. She turned as Adrian stepped onto the terrace, holding two mugs, one extended toward her. "I didn't know how you take it," he said. "So I guessed." She accepted the coffee, fingers brushing his. "Black with a little cinnamon," he gave a nod, surprised. "That's how I drink mine." "I remember," she said, curling her fingers around the warmth. "You mentioned it the night we walked by the Hudson." He leaned against the railing beside her. "That night feels like a lifetime ago." "It does," she agreed. The air between them carried something heavier than tiredness. It had lingered ever since the after-party, where a man in a navy dinner jacket had approached Adrian with a tone too familiar and a stare too curious. Dahlia had stepped away to avoid eavesdropping, but the man's final words had reached her clearly. "Be careful. Not everyone forgets so easily." Adrian hadn't reacted at the time, but now the silence between them was thick with avoidance. She turned to him. "Who was he?" Adrian didn't pretend not to know who she meant. "Nathan Price. He was on the board of my father's company. He didn't like that I took over." "Why?" "Because I didn't want to sell out the company's assets to foreign developers." "He did." Adrian's jaw flexed. "I made the call to keep it whole. It cost him millions." "Is that why he's still angry?" "No," he said. "He's angry because I made the company profitable again without him." Dahlia watched him carefully. "Is he dangerous to me?" "No, but he'll dig. He'll try to find cracks." "That's what he does." She set the mug down. "Then let's not give him any." He looked over, eyes dark and unreadable. "You're not scared off yet." "I've been scared since the moment I stepped into your car," she said. "But running isn't going to make me feel better." Adrian stepped closer, the city falling away behind him. "I never expected you. I wasn't looking for this." "I wasn't either. But here we are." He reached for her hand. "I don't want to lose it." "Then don't." Later that morning, she returned to her apartment, needing space to think. The building was quiet, but a folded envelope had been slipped under her door. Inside, a single sheet of paper. There was no name, no signature. Just two sentences, typed in a sterile serif font. "Careful who you trust. Graves doesn't always tell the full story." She read it twice, then set it down slowly, her spine stiffening. She didn't call Adrian. Not yet. Instead, she went to the gallery. Elena, the director, was waiting with a grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You've become a hot ticket," she said, guiding Dahlia into her office where a stack of business cards and meeting requests waited. "People want to see more of your work. They want to meet you." "I'm not sure I'm ready for that." Elena leaned back in her chair. "Then make them wait, but something tells me you won't be able to for long." Dahlia hesitated. "Elena, did you give my contact details to anyone outside the press?" "No." Why? She pulled the note from her coat and handed it over. Elena scanned it, her brows drawing together. This is creepy. I know. I'll have security check the cameras. Do you want me to call Adrian? No, Dahlia said. I don't want him to think I can't handle it. That night she painted. She hadn't touched a canvas in days, but now her fingers moved instinctively, dragging color across linen with urgent precision. By midnight, 2 new pieces leaned against the wall. One was a woman walking into fog. The other was a man at a window, his reflection fractured in the glass. She stood back, breath heaving. The buzzer rang. She didn't expect him, but he was there, standing in her hallway with eyes that searched hers before he even spoke. I have to tell you something, he said. She stepped aside to let him in. I know about the note, he said. Nathan's behind it. He's trying to rattle you. How do you know? Because he sent something similar to my ex-fiancée once. She never told me until it was too late. Dahlia's chest tightened. You think she was targeted? Adrian exhaled. I think he resented her influence on me. She encouraged me to take control of the company. He hated that. Dahlia sat down slowly. Why didn't you ever say that before? Because I still don't know if I'm right, and I didn't want to turn her death into a conspiracy. She nodded, absorbing that. But if he's willing to do that again, I won't let him near you. She looked up at him. Then make it public, he blinked. What? Make our relationship undeniable. Speak about it. Let the world see it's not a game, that I'm not some passing interest. Adrian hesitated. You want that? I want to take the power back from him, from the press, from everyone. Adrian watched her for a long moment, then said, There's a fundraiser tomorrow night. I'm giving a speech. Come with me. Stand beside me. She nodded. I will. The next evening, the ballroom shimmered with crystal and candlelight. Guests in couture sipped champagne as cameras snapped from every angle. But when Adrian took the stage, the room silenced. His voice was steady, clear. For years, I've avoided the spotlight. I preferred to let my work speak, but some things are worth stepping into the light for. He looked directly at her. This is Dahlia Vance, an artist, a woman with vision, strength, and courage, and someone I'm proud to stand beside. The applause was slow at first, then it swelled. And just like that, the narrative shifted. Reporters stopped speculating, investors stopped whispering, and the people who mattered started listening. After the event, as they stepped into the car, Dahlia turned to him. Do you regret it? No, he said. For the first time in a long time, I don't regret anything. She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. Then let's start something real. Days passed, then weeks. The noise faded. The press moved on, and Dahlia's art began to sell at a pace she'd never imagined. One afternoon, Adrian led her into a sunlit loft across the river. What is this? She asked. Your studio, he said, if you want it. She turned in a slow circle. Skylights, exposed brick, and clean white walls surrounded her, the kind of space artists only dreamed of. You bought this, I'm leasing it, in your name. She stared at him. Why would you do that? Because creating is who you are, and I want you to have everything that makes you feel whole. She walked toward him, placed her hands on his chest. You do know you're ridiculous, I'm aware. She rose on her toes and kissed him. There was no rush now. No tension. Just the steady, certain rhythm of something that had been tested and still stood strong. A month later, they hosted a small showing. Friends, collectors, and artists gathered in her new studio. Adrian stood quietly in the corner, drink in hand, watching her beam as people admired her work. She caught his eye. He raised his glass. Later, when the guests had gone and the lights had dimmed, he pulled her into his arms. I love you, he said simply. She looked up at him, her heart full. I love you too. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. I wasn't going to do this tonight, but I realized something. What? I don't want another day to pass without you knowing you're mine, not just in name. In every way, he opened the box. Inside, a ring, simple, elegant, timeless. She stared at it, then at him. I don't want perfect, she whispered. I want real, he smiled. Then say yes. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Yes. And just like that, the girl who mistook a stranger for her driver became the woman who would ride beside him for the rest of their lives, not because he was a billionaire, but because he saw her, and she saw him. And together, they built a world where love wasn't a fairy tale. It was the truth. The rain had stopped just before dusk, leaving the city glazed in a silver sheen that turned streets into mirrors and made every light shimmer like a star. Inside the studio, Dahlia stood barefoot on the wooden floor, the hem of her linen dress damp from where she'd wandered outside to drag in the canvases drying under the overhang. The last of the guests had left hours ago, but she hadn't been able to bring herself to leave yet. Not when the air still smelled like jasmine and soft laughter still echoed in the corners. Adrian entered quietly, his jacket gone and his sleeves rolled back, collar open, carrying 2 crystal tumblers filled with something amber and warm. He handed her one and tilted his head toward the open window. "I thought you might want to hear it," he said. She listened. From the street below, a violinist played something slow and aching, the sound rising gently toward them like a confession. She leaned her head against his shoulder, letting the music settle into her bones. "I still can't believe this is mine," she murmured. "All of it." Adrian didn't answer right away. Instead, he took her glass and set both on the windowsill before turning her gently by the waist to face him. "You never owed anyone an explanation for your talent," he said, "but I'm glad the world finally caught on." She laughed under her breath but didn't look away. "I didn't just mean the studio." His brow furrowed slightly, but she shook her head before he could speak. "Not just this space. Not the sales or the collectors. I meant you. Us. This feeling that I can stop holding my breath." Adrian exhaled like he hadn't realized he'd been holding his own. They stayed like that until the music faded and the city dimmed, and when they finally turned off the lights, it was only to fall asleep tangled on the studio couch, her sketchbook between them and the scent of paint still lingering in the air. By the following week, the fallout from the smear campaign had disintegrated. Graves Holdings released a quiet but firm legal statement addressing the baseless rumors, and Nathan Price, once a looming shadow, had been named in a financial misconduct probe completely unrelated to Adrian. The timing was poetic, but Adrian hadn't gloated. "I didn't need him to fall," he'd told her. "I just needed him to stop standing in the way," and he had. The press lost interest, the gossip dried up, and what remained was a story not of scandal but of resilience. Dahlia's work had been accepted into a curated international exhibit, her name now spoken in circles that once would have dismissed her as a footnote. She painted daily, sometimes into the early hours, and Adrian would show up with takeout or espresso, or just to watch. They were no longer learning how to fit into each other's lives. They were building one together. On a late summer morning, Dahlia stepped into the cavernous main room of Graves Holdings for the first time. She wore tailored navy trousers and a silk blouse tucked neatly at the waist, her curls pinned back. Adrian waited for her by the elevators, already surrounded by his executive team, but his eyes found her the moment she entered. "You sure about this?" he asked under his breath as they walked toward the boardroom. "You wanted someone to redesign the creative direction of your philanthropy branch," she said. "You asked who I'd recommend. I'm recommending me." He paused, his lips curving slightly. "You make a strong case. Then let me prove it." She did. Over the next hour, she presented a plan that restructured the firm's community arts initiative, laid out a proposal for mobile creative labs in underserved neighborhoods, and closed with a vision for a nonprofit gallery that would rotate young talent quarterly. When she finished, the room was quiet. Then a woman across the table, Adrian's CFO, nodded once. "I think we've just met our new director of cultural development." Adrian didn't speak until they were alone in his office afterward. He pulled her in by the hips and kissed her temple. "You didn't just walk into my world," he said. "You're transforming it. I'm just getting started." That night, he took her back to the lake house in upstate New York, the one he'd told her about but never shown her. The drive was slow, the roads winding and kissed by golden leaves just beginning to turn. They arrived at twilight. It wasn't a mansion. It was a glass and cedar home nestled into the slope of a wooded hill just above the waterline. Clean lines, open spaces. A dock that stretched into the stillness like an invitation. "I designed it after my father died," Adrian said as he unlocked the door, "but I never brought anyone here, until now." Inside, it smelled like cedar and lemon oil. The walls were lined with books and worn photographs. A painting of a woman, unfinished, rested on an easel in the corner. Dahlia approached it slowly. She's beautiful, Adrian joined her. She was, but I think I was trying to paint my guilt more than her. You don't have to finish it, she said. You can start something new. He looked at her then, and for the first time there was no distance in his eyes, no guarded edge, just peace. They spent the weekend there wrapped in quiet. They cooked. They swam. They planned what the nonprofit gallery would look like. Dahlia sketched the floor plan in the margins of a gardening catalog, and Adrian pointed out the structural flaws like a man who'd rebuilt skyscrapers from scratch. On the last night, she stood on the dock wrapped in a blanket, watching the moon ripple across the lake. Adrian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. I want to get married here, he said. She turned halfway startled. Here, he nodded. Just us, just this. I don't need 50 tables and a string quartet, I just need you. Yes, she said, without hesitation. They married under the birch trees by the dock 4 weeks later. Her sister officiated. Elena cried the entire time. Adrian wore a charcoal suit with no tie. Dahlia wore a simple ivory dress and a crown of wildflowers. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, and when Adrian slid the ring onto her finger, he whispered, "You're the first thing I've built that feels like home." Her answer was a kiss that tasted like salt and sun and 1,000 quiet promises. Afterward, they danced barefoot in the grass while her sister played old records on a vintage player, and the lake glistened behind them like it was blessing the whole moment. They stayed in the lake house through the fall, alternating between city meetings and country mornings, living in a rhythm that felt like it had always been waiting for them. One morning in late October, Dahlia stood in the kitchen holding a white test strip in her hand. She didn't speak. Just stared at it until Adrian stepped in behind her, his hand already reaching for hers. "Are we ready?" she asked. He kissed her neck. "We built a life for this." The months that followed were a blur of gentle chaos. Dahlia painted with one hand and held her belly with the other. Adrian renovated the 3rd floor of their city apartment into a nursery with hand-carved animal mobiles and a mural she painted herself. When their daughter arrived on a snowy morning in March, she was wrapped in a blanket the color of dawn and named after a flower that only bloomed once a year. They brought her home to a room filled with sunlight and stories. And Dahlia, who once barged into a stranger's car desperate and late and completely unaware, now held her daughter in the crook of her arm, her husband cooking breakfast in the next room, and her newest canvas already waiting just beyond the window. Nothing about their love had been simple. But it had been real, and it had become everything.